Welcome to the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Jason Elkins, and in addition to being your host, I'm also a former U.S. Army paratrooper, third-generation commercial hot air balloon pilot, paramotor pilot, ex-Montana fly fishing guide, advanced open water scuba diver, and a full-time nomad that's visited more than 30 countries on 6 continents. As a seasoned adventure travel expert with a passion for creating and sharing meaningful experiences, I'm on a quest to impact the lives of adventure travelers, the tour operators they rely on, and the communities that host them. Every week, I bring you exclusive interviews with fascinating adventure tourism experts who have agreed to share their personal stories, favorite destinations, and some invaluable travel insights they've picked up along the way. We'll enjoy a casual conversation, create some connections, and likely share some laughs. It's my hope that by the end of each episode, this big world will feel just a bit smaller. Let's get started, shall we? All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. So happy to have each of you back here to enjoy the show today. We've got a great show. We've got Pat Pendergast from the Fly Shop, a former kind of fly fishing world colleague, partner in that. And so super excited to have him on the show today. Pat, welcome.
Thank you, Jason. I'm looking forward to speaking with you about a little bit about fly fishing travel.
Yeah, very, very cool. It's definitely a topic that's near and dear to my heart, as you know, and by now I'm sure all the listeners know that it is. And you're definitely, both in your role with the Fly Shop and just the Fly Shop in general as a real leader in that part of the industry. So you bring a lot of value to everybody that might want to hear about that. So thank you, Pat. I also recognize that as I'm doing these, having a lot of great conversations, I'm recognizing that pretty much everybody that works in adventure tourism, adventure travel, definitely fly fishing travel, has some sort of interesting story. Like how, and usually it's the first question people ask is, how did you get into this? So I'm going to go with the standard question of how did you get into this? How did you get from where you were to where you are today?
Absolutely. Actually, it's an interesting story, I think. We'll see. But I've always fished and hunted all my life and never done any travel. And my dream was to get up to Alaska. And I actually had a job lined up as a commercial fisherman in Alaska, which fell through about 2 months before I was supposed to depart. So I had some construction skills, and I learned from some mutual friends that a fellow was starting a lodge in Alaska and it needed some carpenters to put bathrooms in cabins. So I got hired, drove from San Francisco to Anchorage in 5 days. Went into the lodge in April, built the bathrooms in all the cabins, and was basically hired as what we call a camp jack, just kind of a do everything, start the generator, move fuel, help with luggage, just one of those maintenance guys. And I was having a great time. I was 22 years old, didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I said, Alaska's it. About halfway through the season, one of the guides couldn't cut it. Mm-hmm. And I had the fly fishing skills and fishing skills, outdoor skills. So they said, hey, tomorrow morning you're guiding. I said, I'm ready. Let's do it. And
let's go.
I'm throwing right in the fire, but I was ready for it. I was excited and finished my first season in Alaska. Got out of there like mid-October. It was a long summer from April to October. Never once went into town or other than out in the bush. So when I got back into Anchorage, I was a little spooked by all the traffic and cars moving fast and sounds. But
it was like Crocodile Dundee, huh?
Exactly. I was like, whoa. So I loved it and got a job the next year for a different lodge and went back guiding in Alaska, usually June through the end of September. Did a couple more seasons there. Then I kind of started to hone in on what I wanted to do. And I had some college completed. So I went back and said, all right, I'm going to do this thing. So I went back, enrolled at Chico State and majored in recreation administration with a minor in business or thereabouts. And then would continue to go back to Alaska and guide each summer, so to pay for school basically. And at that time, school was really reasonable and I could make enough money during the summer to pay for school and lodging and food and everything, without having to work going to school. So I've pretty much put the
Nice.
pedal down, fast track school, got out of there and did an internship with a company named Fishing International out of Santa Rosa, and worked there a couple of years, started getting the itch for Alaska again. I had met Mike Michalak, the owner of the fly shop, and his wife Bertha on a familiarity trip that we both went on in Mexico. So we had sort of a relationship, and a friend of mine was starting a new lodge in Alaska, and I said, yeah, I'm in. So quit Fish International, moved back to Alaska with my wife. We were newly married, and we lived out in the bush for a couple of years, a couple of seasons, way out there. It was 130 miles southwest of Cordova, on the Alaska Gulf Coast. And we had a silver salmon camp there. So did that.
What did your wife think of that? This would be a good opportunity here.
That's a great story. My wife had the absolute dream job. She was in movie production in Hollywood. I met her in Tuolumne Meadows up in Yosemite, and she had completed a movie and we met and hiked and biked and then she helped co-produce The Mask with Jim Carrey.
Okay.
And Industrial Light and Magic at the time did all the special effects. So after the movie, she got an interview with ILM and ended up moving to Northern California from Hollywood and went to work for them.
Okay.
And we ended up getting back together and got married. And I said, well, you want to do this? You want to move to the bush of Alaska from this dream job at, working for George Lucas and Star Wars and everything else. And she goes, well, if we don't do it now, we'll never do it.
Wow.
But, yeah, let's do it. We put everything in storage, packed up the pickup, and took a month to drive to Alaska. And then we were there.
Have you ever considered that perhaps you should have been a dating relationship coach for men to help them find women that would go to the bush in Alaska for?
Yeah, I don't know about
fishing guide. I mean, that's if you could can that experience or can that skill, you could make a lot of money.
Well, my wife's great. She was a gamer. And she wanted to do something different, and she kind of grew up in an outdoor family, so it wasn't that crazy for her. And we took her up for a test run in the spring, and she said, yeah, I like this. We could do it. So, but I was selling fishing trips, so maybe I was a good salesman.
Yeah. Yeah, there we go.
Anyways, we had a good time.
So what was there anything just about that experience? Because I've had similar experiences. I remember my wife, we picked up and moved to Belize. We put everything in a storage space and we're going. She'd never been out of the country. And she was pretty game to go at the beginning. Near the end, it had changed a little bit. And, just the realities of that type of work just kind of set in. I'm curious, did you have any experiences like that in Alaska that caused you to leave, or what came up?
It's what people understand when they work for, a seasonal sport fishing lodge in Alaska. I think it's as tough mentally as it is physically. And you have a short 12 to 14 week season of, intense, work. 12 people coming in on Friday, 12 people going out, and boom, 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 boom. There's no rest. There's no days off. And at the end of the season, you're kind of running on empty. But as far as it just didn't work out with the partnership that I was in with the lodge. And I had been talking with Mike Michalak for some time, and he was ready to expand his whole business. And so actually, November 96, we flew down, put the truck on a barge, moved down to Redding, found a rental place. It was a horrible place, but my wife said, well, it's got indoor plumbing and a garage door opener. It's great.
And it's not 40, and it's not 40 below outside.
Yeah. It's not blowing 100 miles an hour. So, I started here at the fly shop. I think my anniversary here is like November 13th or something. So it'll be like 26, 27 years or something like that. Wow. And I've been here since. And when I came into the travel department of the fly shop, it was Mike and his wife Bertha. That was a travel department.
Mhm.
And that was, yeah. So 2000 or 1997, we made this huge push in the company, not just travel, but retail and everything else. And we just kind of took off from there. Now, we have, I don't know, 5 different guys, destination specialists and a couple administrative people. We're still small. The goal was never to be the biggest. We just wanted to be the best that we could. We have a little different business philosophy than other similar businesses. We're not all things to all people. We kind of choose who we want to work with.
Mhm.
We like, small occupancy destinations, owner operators, family owned, people with skin in the game, that are there on site, that we think makes a difference in a person's, week experience fly fishing.
No, absolutely. And I can relate to that. I've watched the fly shop. I think I met you first a few years maybe after you had come on board, and things were already tracking quite well at that point. And just, for any of our listeners that aren't familiar with, maybe they're not into fly fishing, because that's about the only reason I could think that they wouldn't know of the fly shop. But anybody listening to this, it's kind of that. I don't know if you like the word boutique. It's, for whatever reason, it's the word that's coming into my mind. It doesn't really fit, but it's just the, I've been on many of the trips that you guys offer. It's good stuff. It really is. So I think that's smart. And for those people that really don't know anything about fly fishing, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I've got a fly fishing expert right here sitting in front of me. How do you describe fly fishing to somebody that's like, I like to fish, or I don't like to fish? What's this fly fishing thing all about? Because I realize that might be the case for some of our listeners. So if you don't mind.
Yeah, fly fishing is just a different means of delivering a artificial, we'll call it lure. In this case, in fly fishing, it's a fly to a species of fish. Some of the best fly fishers I've met over my career have been great conventional anglers, because the fish don't necessarily change their habits or where they're gonna be in a fishery. It's just in fly fishing, we're using a different means of catching them. Instead of using bait or a spinner or a spoon or whatever, a plug, jig, we're using a fly. So the fly line is actually weighted on the fly rod, and that's what delivers the end product to the fish. But you could count on the fish, whether you're spin fishing, bait casting, whatever you're doing, the fish are still in the same spot.
So that begs the obvious question that I know I've heard before. I'm going to ask you is, so why would you use fly fishing if you can use spinners, lures? What's the draw or appeal, do you think, to fly fishing?
I think in fly fishing, there's a lot of grace involved, a lot of art. That's a good question. It's just, I don't think it's better or worse. It's just different.
In my mind, it seems to maybe engage a different part of the brain or just emotions. Because it's hard to answer that question. I agree, because I've asked myself that quite a few times. But it,
it's a good question. I mean, it's not necessarily about muscle. It's not, probably the people that, well, not probably, I know the people that pick it up the quickest are usually women because they know how to listen. Yeah. And
they don't think they already know. After holding a fly rod once.
It's a blank slate, and they follow the guide's instructions, and, in no time, they got them casting 30, 40 feet and getting it where they need to be, and they're successful. I mean, honestly, one of the worst things a guy could hear is, I've been fishing for 45 years. You don't have to worry about me. Just take care of my wife. And you look over at the guy and you're like, well, you've been doing it wrong for 45 years. And you just got to say, okay, You do what you want to do. I'll work with your wife. We're going to catch a bunch of fish. So,
And
yeah.
and I know, and I knew you were going to say that. And I also know that when you say I'm going to work with your wife, I know that the very next words out of your mouth oftentimes are, and you keep your mouth shut. Right?
No, we just move far away.
Yeah. I did a lot of guiding out of a drift boat, and it's like we could only get about 6 feet away from each other.
Yeah.
And it was part of the briefing in the morning. Like, okay, yeah, fine. I'm going to work with your wife, but you have to keep your mouth shut. And because I can't tell you how many times she's like kicking butt. She's doing great. She's catching fish, and he opens his mouth, and then she's like, okay, I'm going to take a break.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't blame him. I mean, I get it.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
And they usually come around once their wife is in there, like their 6th or 7th fish. They're kind of like, well, maybe I do need a little direction. So it's all good.
Yeah. They open up to that, and it's a lot of fun. I remember I'm going to share this because maybe there are people listening that are thinking about getting into this or getting a partner into it. And I used to take my daughter with my wife quite often. We'd go float the river, and she drew a picture at school one day. She drew a drift boat with me rowing the boat, and she's got the little bubble coming out of my mouth saying blah, blah, blah. And then there's a bubble coming out of my wife's mouth saying, leave me alone, quit talking to me. I know what I'm doing. So, and I share that because it does not matter how great of an angler you are, how great of a guide you are. Do not guide your wife.
No, do not teach her to fly with the fly cast either. No, I mean, farm that out to your buddy.
Yeah, she would have enjoyed the experience. And she's an incredible angler, and she would have enjoyed the experience so much better if early on I had asked one of my guide buddies, "Hey, can you go take her fishing, please? Because she'll enjoy it a lot more. I'd probably enjoy it a lot more." So, anyway, so anybody listening, that's just
no, that's a great story. That hits home for a lot of people. I guarantee it.
It did, and my wife put it right on the fridge. She's like, "Yep, this is going here, so I could see it every day."
I want a picture of that picture.
I will find it. It was cute, but it was also like a little knife in the heart. But it was like, okay, funny. Kids don't have filters; they get it. And you know what? I've also learned. I'm now divorced, so I didn't learn very well. And I learned.
We were talking about fly fishing. I mean, it's challenging. I think it's a natural step for fellas that have mastered, spin and bait casting, to move into fly fishing. It's just another way of, pursuing fish. Mm-hmm. I was thinking of an analogy. It'd be like, downhill skiing or snowboarding versus telemark skiing.
That's
you're both going down the hill. You're all three of those. You're skiing on snow, but telemark skiing is different. It's
and everybody else is looking at the telemark skier. Why is he doing it that way?
And it's beautiful though. I mean, you see someone cutting turns the telemark skiing. It's like, oh my gosh, that's just art. It's poetry.
And as we chat, and I've forgotten more than what I ever knew, and it seems to go quicker as I get older. And Pat, aren't you a archery hunter?
I have, yes, in the past. Sure.
And I don't know why, for some reason, I'm feeling like we've had this conversation before, and we may have. And I feel like an analogy that I've used, and for some reason in my head right now, I feel like, oh, that's something I heard from Pat, is that archery is to hunting what fly fishing is to fishing, right? Archery hunting is to hunting what fly fishing, because it's not necessarily that you're closer to the animal, to the nature, but it maybe requires a little bit more cerebral engagement on what you're doing. Certainly. And I like all forms of fishing, but it does definitely, when you're fly fishing, you pretty much can't think about anything else.
And I think you're connected. You're more connected to the actual process of archery hunting. And you could go from, shooting compound bows to shooting recurves to shooting, stick bows or, straight limb bows. And then there's guys that, make their own bows. and then go out and archery hunt with it. And that's taken it to a whole different level.
That kind of sounds like fly fishing, doesn't it? Because we've got guys that make their own rods, dry fly fishermen, nymph fishermen, streamer fishermen,
tie their own flies.
Yeah.
I mean, you could take it to any level. It's interesting.
I'm gonna stick with that analogy.
Yeah, it's interesting too that I grew up conventional fishing, and I still have friends that don't fly fish, and they'll ask me to go, in their bass boat to go bass fishing, and I get so excited about picking up a bait casting rod and throwing plugs or jigs or worms, and it's beautiful equipment. I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing is like a piece of art, and we're flying around the lake in the boat and having fun. And to me, as almost exclusively a fly fisherman, when I get those opportunities, I always look forward to them, and they're exciting. They're fun.
I would agree, because I grew up conventional fishing, and I remember the first time I went fly fishing, I actually had bought a cheap rod at Cabela's. I was on my way to Alaska. I was in the Army. I was like, I guess I need a fly rod. I'd never held one. I didn't know anything about it. Went up to Alaska, never ended up using it. A few years later, I walked into a fly shop in Casper, Wyoming, and I know you've seen this so many times when someone walks in with a rod that is not well suited for the fishing that you do in the area.
Oh yeah,
says, I've got this rod. Can you help me figure out how to catch some fish with it? So I'm sure it had an 8 or 9 weight, which is for salmon, steelhead, that type of thing. And I walked in. I said, you want to catch some trout in Casper, Wyoming? And they were so nice. They didn't even say, no, that's the wrong rod. He sold me a couple leaders, showed me how to tie a fly on, sold me a half dozen flies, and then drew me a map to this little road with some gates. And he's like, open this gate, open that gate. And there's this little creek, and it was full of brook trout. And I went up there. I was catching brook trout that were 4 inches long on my salmon rod. And I didn't know any different. I thought it was amazing. Every time I set the hook, which I didn't really know how to do, I'd have to go get the fish out of the alfalfa.
Oh, that's funny.
And it was like, oh my gosh. I literally, within a week, I gave all of my conventional gear to my brother. And it wasn't out of snobbery. It was just like, I am going to dedicate myself to this until I figure this out. And then maybe I'll, go back and try some of that other stuff. Gave him all the stuff. I didn't touch a conventional anything for years. Became a guide within a year and a half in Montana. And I was just absolutely hooked. And now, listening to you talk about going out with friends and, bass fishing and that, I'm like, yeah, absolutely spot on. I am like, I love all the different types of fishing now.
Absolutely.
But there are people out there that are kind of purists. It's like, oh, I just want to do it with fly rod. Doesn't mean they're snobs or whatever. It's just, that's how they feel the most challenged and connected. So
absolutely. No, I don't think there's a right or wrong in it. It's what you enjoy. It's how you connect, with nature.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I also remember someone saying, like, the great thing about trout are they live in beautiful places.
Absolutely.
And that's like that with a lot of fish. I mean, I have sat below the dam in, Tennessee with a bucket full of chicken livers. I've done all that. And I guess I would say, well, maybe that's not a beautiful place. But I have also visited some amazingly beautiful scenic places and used the excuse that I'm going to catch fish. And I know you have it. I know you have as well. So so for people maybe that aren't completely tuned into the fishing part of it, it's not all about the fish.
Oh my
gosh, the mountains, the rivers, the streams. So
the people, the culture.
Exactly.
I just read a really great little quote from a fellow who returned from Mongolia, which is an amazing destination. It's an amazing fishing destination, but it's so much more than that culturally. The people, the history, the Chinggis Khan, everything about it. And he said this simple, beautiful quote that the fish are the outcome, but not the reason. And I thought, man, he just nailed it. And cool. it is. I mean, like you said, trout live in beautiful places. But I always say, destinations are but servants to our journeys, being that it's the journey of getting to these far off lands and seeing this beautiful country and meeting these wonderful people and experiencing the food and the culture. It's a combination of things. Sometimes the fish is way down the ladder. I mean, it's like fishing is an excuse to go to Mongolia or go to Chile or Argentina or Tanzania tiger fishing. It's like it's almost like the bait for us.
It's
you're the fly
right.
for us, but it's the whole journey.
No, you're absolutely right, because I can think of, I mean, you actually just named off a few places. I'm like, yeah, okay. Specifically, actually, when you mentioned Tanzania, I did go, I worked for Orvis, a fly fishing company. I went to Zambia, and it was Orvis. So yeah, the fishing was definitely an element involved. But I was just speaking earlier today about taking my mom. I took my mom to Zambia. She likes to fish as well. And the whole conversation that I had with the person I was speaking to today, we talked about the experience of going to Africa, time with my mom, the people in the group, all this stuff. And I did not once remember the tigerfish until you said tigerfish in Tanzania.
That's
and
cool.
It's like, ooh, yeah, because my mom's like, I want to go to Africa and catch a tigerfish. Okay, great. So we went. And then 5-6 years later, I'm having conversations with people talking about Africa, and I don't even remember that we were there to fish.
I think that's a good sign.
Yeah,
definitely a good sign. Good for you.
That's very cool. And you've seen that happen I'm sure it's happened for you personally as well as your clients. Do you have any stories that kind of come to mind as far as maybe, I think parents and children, adult children and their parents is always pretty interesting. I always thought that it was very interesting when you had a mixed group of people come together, because I know that you've got trips that non-anglers can go on and have an amazing time. So just curious if there's anything that comes up that somebody that's listening to this, like, yeah, love to go fly fishing somewhere, but my partner, my husband isn't going to want to go with me.
We do a lot of trips for anglers, and we call them non-anglers, to suitable destinations. I mean, some destinations that we represent are hardcore fishing is first and foremost, sun up to sundown, and not a destination that would be suitable for non-anglers or family members that are not that focused on fly fishing.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say the majority of the destinations, and at some level, are attracted to non-anglers. I mean, to me, like Chile, Patagonia, Argentina, Patagonia, New Zealand, just absolutely gorgeous places. It's like stepping back in time 50 years ago. And as my wife, who likes to fish, but she'd rather ride horses, she goes, the light's different in Patagonia, and she was in the film business. So she recognizes this, and she goes, it's just absolutely gorgeous, and whether it's hiking or horseback riding or doing whitewater rafting or eating cultural foods, meeting different people, going to small little farms and meeting people that are subsistence living off the land. I mean, there's so much more to a trip than purely the fishing.
Yeah. And again, it's that trout. We're saying trout a lot, but obviously there's other fish, but trout live in beautiful places like Patagonia, which means you also have beautiful scenery. You have things like whitewater rafting, horseback riding.
Sure.
Generally, where there's good fishing, oftentimes there's other cool stuff to see. Whether or not the operation, that you're working with in that area is tapped into that very well. I mean, even I can say, well, the Amazon's an amazing place, whether you fish or not.
Right.
But I can also, but as you know, a lot of those destinations in the Amazon, those are fishing lodges.
Yep.
So, and
some lodges are more suitable for non-anglers than others. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I think people need to have, as a non-angler, they have to have an open mind, and they like to experience new destinations, new sceneries, new culture, meet, people that, they've never met before, or have a whole different perspective on life. Mm-hmm. And a lot of lodges cater to non-anglers, that have non-angling activities. And sometimes it's just, laying on a chaise lounge on the beach and having fresh fruit and a cocktail delivered to them for the day, and they're reading their book. So
yeah, that can
that's
be fun.
not bad either.
No, it's absolutely not. And it kind of reminds me of another thing that I kind of honestly surprised me a little bit when I was managing the lodge in Belize. It was primarily it was a fly fishing lodge. We had a scuba diving program and we had an ecotourism program. And a lot of the non-anglers, regardless of, sex or whatever, a lot of the non-anglers would come there. Their partners would go fishing all day. And maybe the non-anglers would go out on a snorkeling trip or look for manatees or look for turtles or whatever. And I'm going to say this as someone that worked in the fly fishing industry for quite a while. Honestly, sometimes it was more fun to hang out with the ladies. I say the ladies, but non-anglers, I'm not sure what the word is that's best. But, the non-angling companions, they were a lot of fun to go out with because they weren't hung up on the size of the fish they caught, the number of fish they caught, whether their partner in the boat caught more fish than them or whatever.
Absolutely.
So
no, I agree with you.
So much fun. So if you're listening to this and your husband or your wife has been saying, I want to go on a fishing trip, but you go on a fishing trip with me, talk to someone like Pat. Trust me, you can have just as much fun or sometimes
absolutely.
To be honest with you, because sometimes anglers get pretty wrapped up in it when they've had
they're definitely focused. Some of the most enjoyable trips I've had when my wife has joined me has been a flats fishing trip in the Caribbean or wherever some warm water destination is. And she'll fish and be in the boat, and whether we're chasing permit or tarpon or bonefish, and then we'll knock off, say, 2 p.m., 1 p.m., and we'll bring our snorkeling gear. Mm-hmm. And the guide will take us to some really cool place on the reef, that no one goes to. And we'll just dive over the side and we'll snorkel and swim and, kind of bond in underneath the water and, come up, after a couple hours.
Oh, this was a good turn.
Yeah, really. But at least connect, we'll say. Yeah. Maybe that's not the right one. But anyways,
that's the soundbite for TikTok, Pat, that I told you about. We might,
but it's fun. It's fun. Have a cold beer on your way back to the lodge, and just something different, something that you share, other than just fishing.
No, that's super smart. Which, if I'd been more aware and more mature at a younger age, my daughter probably would not have drawn that picture. We would have had less fight because I'm like, we're going to go 12 hours. We're going to be out for 12 hours. Yeah. My daughter's hungry, cold. My wife is like, she doesn't want to row the boat, but she doesn't want me to tell her where to cast her. It was just friggin' miserable. Yeah. I've learned, for all of us, got some great pictures of fish, but we're divorced.
Yeah.
So, it does. I think fishing guides are probably pretty kind of on the high end of the average divorce rate. I don't know. I won't speak for anybody else. She's great. She worked for us as well. She's definitely a trooper if for some reason she's listening to this. And I'm curious. So we covered quite a few things. What I would like to just touch on what you've seen change in the, let's be specific, fly fishing travel industry over the course of the, last, we could go all the way back, but maybe just the last 10 years, because obviously we had a period of time where people were not traveling.
Absolutely.
Go fishing. Social media has changed a bit, which has impacted a lot of the adventure tourism travel, people, going to places just so they could get a picture so they could put it on Instagram, regardless of what experience they're actually having. There is some of that in fishing because I have social media connections that are into fishing. So Absolutely. Tell us what you've seen change in the last 10 years or so.
I think social media definitely has an effect on, in our industry for sure. As it does probably in any industry. I would say within the last 10 years, I think there's people that are less focused on maybe having, another car or another vacation home or a timeshare or, And they want to get out and experience the world. They want to see new places. They want to meet new people. They want to experience culture outside of their everyday life. And I think that's been very healthy definitely for our industry.
What do you think I guess two questions. What do you think has potentially caused that, just in your own view? And how do you get that pulse? So if you're taking the pulse, I think people are more interested in experiences, less interested in buying cars. I'm just curious, like, how are you seeing that?
They're non-tangible assets, it's like, I guess there would be different levels within your market, but I think a lot of the older baby boomers that are coming up into their late 60s, early 70s and I've heard this from several friends and clients. It's like, man, if I don't do it right now, I'm not going to do it.
Okay. Yeah,
I saw that guy that was, 85 years old, and he was in great shape, but there was, he was struggling. And it's like the clock is ticking. And he goes, I've worked all my life. I've worked hard. I've been successful. It's like, I can't take it with me. Why not experience life? Why not get out there and see some new things? And what I'm seeing is guys are hearing that clock ticking and said, you know what, I'm going.
Okay.
I want to get out there. I want to see it. I don't need another car. I don't need another truck. I don't need another boat. I don't need another house. I want to go to Mongolia. I want to go to New Zealand. I want to go to Brazil or Bolivia or Colombia and see and experience. And I think people are maybe quantifying their quality of life less on tangible items than they are on experiences and living for that moment of being living for that moment of the experience.
As I listen to you say that, I can't help but I guess I'm kind of stuck on the COVID thing, right?
Sure.
Because if I said the last 10 years, COVID was definitely within the last 10 years. And that's where I saw that kind of that reevaluation.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm sitting in Colombia right now. I've been traveling full time for 2 years. Oh yeah. Right about as COVID was improving and things were opening up a little bit is when I was like, screw it. I was working in real estate, selling houses in Arizona.
Right.
So you're talking about tangible things and that represent, status or, I'm just going to say status and move on, but to where it's like, okay, yeah, I'm not going to live the next 10 years the way I lived the last 10 years. And if it wasn't for COVID, I'm sure I would not be sitting right here. So
absolutely not. I think it changed a lot of us. I think it did bring people. I think it focused people on what was important to them. I mean, not being able to maybe visit and see family during the holidays, and I think that was a game changer. Or spending time with their family. And getting out in the world.
Exactly. I can't help but so you were describing the guy that's like, you know what, if I don't do it now, I'm not going to be able to do it.
Right.
So that person that has that awareness gets to that point. Okay. They finally retired. Maybe they sold some investments and they're like, okay, I'm ready. And then the world shuts down.
Yep.
And it's like, I don't want to swear here, but like, that's what I'd be saying. I'd be like, oh crap.
Yeah.
All of this work and effort. And the thing with COVID was we didn't know that it was, it's a couple of years.
Yeah.
Like, just hang on a couple of years, because I remember even myself, I was in my 40s and I was like, oh man, I'm not going to be able to do all the things I wanted to do. And I'm pretty easygoing and relaxed about a lot of things. But it was, so as soon as I could go, I'm like, okay, I'm going. I'm not going to get myself stuck in a spot where I can't go see Colombia someday. I can't go do this, can't go do that.
Sure.
But the person that doesn't have that kind of time, I'm still pretty young.
Right.
The person that doesn't have that kind of time, I think it would just be heartbreaking. And there were a lot of heartbreaking things. I'm not
absolutely. There was a reality check for a lot of people, and for a lot of people, it's not about having the discretionary income to travel the world, be it fishing or whatever you're doing. It's the time. But I think people started to reevaluate their lives and say, you know what, I need to give travel as much time and emphasis as other portions of my life, because someday I'm not going to be able to do this. And I've always, the saddest things we hear is like, oh, I always wanted to go to Tierra del Fuego and catch one of them big sea trout. And the guy waited and waited and waited. And, he finds out he's got some horrible disease, or he can't do it physically, or, and you're like, damn, man, it's like, you should have done it when you had the time and you had the discretionary income to go do it. It's like, don't wait, because life changes. Life throws you curveballs, and all of a sudden you're like in a position where you can't go, and you have all the means to go. You just can't do it.
I think that's probably why I've made a lot of the life choices I have, is because it would be just, I think that would be almost a version of hell for me to have.
I think it's the definition of hell. Yeah.
The time and the resources, and not be able to go. And I mean, there's so many things. It's the same thing with family. I mean, this is a parallel to a lot of things. A lot of people neglect when they're younger because they're after money, resources, whatever. And, and then their kids grow up and go away to college, and or they move to Columbia and their parents are like, hey, wait a minute, where are you going? So it's, I think it's a great conversation. I'm curious, over the last 10 years, you and I have both aged. I'm curious if your typical, your average guest, client, whatever you want to call them, whatever word you want to use, has changed as well. Do you feel like your clients are getting a little older, or do you have an influx of younger people? What have you noticed?
I would say probably the mean average of a guy who's traveling with us anyways, probably in the industry, is probably 67, 68, 66 years old. A lot of these guys are aging out. But there's up and coming young guys that have, they got through college, they started a family. Maybe the family's old enough that they could, designate a week to go with one of their buddies, up to BC steelhead fishing, and they're in a financial situation to do so. So I know, I think generally speaking, not just in fly fishing travel, but in travel overall, adventure travel, outside travel, outdoor travel, a lot of guys, they're a significant amount of guys are aging out for certain types of destinations. That 60 to say 70 is going hard right now. And then maybe the 45 to 55 are starting to pick up, do more trips.
I'm curious, because one of the things you and I had discussed, possibly discussing on this conversation, is kind of, new stuff, what's changing as far as destinations. And as I heard you talk a little bit about maybe some of the, the older guys aging out a little bit, and then you've got maybe some younger guys coming in. Do you see a shift in the types of destinations? And the only way I can really explain the question is, like, are the younger guys more open to destinations with more activities? Are they more hardcore? How does that like, so your typical 45, 50-year-old, are they going?
Yeah, I think,
the 60 and 70-year-olds?
Yeah, I could give you a good example of that. It's like, Dorado fishing in Bolivia, Samani. I tell guys, a person who's in decent physical shape, can hike, is physically able, is going to have a much different experience than a fellow that's, way overweight, needs a new hip or needs a new knee and can't hike and walk and wade and swim across rivers. So yeah, I think the younger guys that are coming in to the fold of fly fishing travel are looking for more adventurous trips, trips that they know maybe in 20 or 30 years are not going to be able to do.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, there's older anglers that want to do those trips that probably shouldn't do those trips. And they go and they kind of get a reality check. It's like, holy moly, that was a lot harder than I thought, and it's like, geez, I told you, it's, it's going to kick your butt. But
so maybe this is a good opportunity for me to mention my sponsor, the trip evacuation coverage. No, just kidding.
absolutely.
If they were sponsoring the show, that would have been a great time. Thank you for the setup. But yeah, I hear you. And probably as the operator that's helping them book these trips and sending them on these trips, I imagine, is that a kind of a heart to heart or head to head that you
I mean, you have to
have with these guys, right?
I mean, I think it's our obligation, our duty to tell people exactly what kind of experience they're getting into, and to be honest and say, I don't think, this thing's probably not right for you.
Yeah. Which is
hard to do, but that doesn't mean people are necessarily aging out of fly fishing. It's just picking a different fly fishing experience that could accommodate them better.
Yeah.
As you get older, guys are losing their balance. They're not as strong as they were. They don't like the, wade in difficult water, heavy water. Get them in a drift boat, get them in a raft.
Yeah.
They're going to have a great experience. And, when there's opportunities to get out of the boat and wade in soft water, then do that. It doesn't mean you have to quit. It's just, I think it'd be a little more prudent in selecting the right destination for your physical ability or capability.
I agree with you 100%. I've, been on trips with people that once you're there, you kind of realize, oh, maybe this wasn't the right trip. Doesn't mean they're not having fun. But me as the trip leader maybe is worried the whole time.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately things do happen. We're dealing with remote locations that are not always easy to get out of. So that's super important.
And it should be noted too.
Destinations, I feel like you've probably been just about everywhere.
I was just going to say, it should be noted too that when those situations arise where someone's probably in over their head, the outfitters that I've worked with and fished with are really good about trying to accommodate those people. I just was with an outfitter here last month, and one of the guys that came up was on a walker. He needed to use a walker to be mobile, and he figured it out. He got this guy fishing and got him in the river, and he caught fish, and it was awesome. He says, "This best." He goes, "I don't know if I could ever do this again, but oh my gosh, thank you for the greatest, adventure I've had in a long time, and I'll remember this until I'm, gone."
Those are super impact, because we were talking about the guys that couldn't go, and now we're talking about the guys that were able to have that, and that's super rewarding. I've lifted guys. I know you have as well. Lifted them into the drift boat.
Absolutely.
Okay, here, have a seat. Try and stay balanced, and they just float down the river all day. Just
and they're just having a blast. And I think in the back of my head, and probably you do as well, is like, I hope when I'm this age, somebody's that kind to me. It's like, all right, old man, it's like, let me get your ass in the boat. We're going to have a fun day. And I know you can fish. So let's just go. And I hope someone is that kind of me someday.
Oh yeah. I hope so too. And yeah, just like, please, because I don't want to sit at the ramp and watch everybody else float away. I'm like,
exactly.
Strap me in somehow, somewhere. I also had a hot air balloon ride business, and we had situations there where they were kind of similar.
Yeah.
You get people come and they're like, this is my lifelong dream. And they're in their 80s or 90s or sometimes even a little older. And, there's always safety considerations as an operator, as a balloon pilot. You've always got those considerations.
Absolutely.
And when you have that honest conversation and you make, well-informed choices and you're able to make it work, there's like, we were talking about fishing. I was already thinking about this guy that flew in my balloon. It was one of the last things he did in his life. And to this day, his partner who was there with him will send me a message of a photo of him in the balloon, on the anniversary of his death.
Very cool.
And it's just like, it just gives me chills. So,
absolutely.
And that's why I believe that's why a lot of us do adventure. Keep saying adventure tourism just because I think it is different. I'm trying to, not knocking any other type of tourism, but I think when you're able to connect with your clients like that, and you've got the guides and the clients and the other clients, and everybody's just connected doing something that's just kind of cool, quite frankly, is special. I've always been happy to be part of that. What do you see as, what's your next hot? I feel like you've been maybe you've been I've got two questions. You've probably been everywhere you want to go. I don't know. And I'm going to ask you the impossible question that everybody asks you, and just see how you answer it. Where's your favorite place, Pat? Where's your favorite where's your favorite place to go? Usually
where I am going.
That's a really good answer.
And people say, well, that's kind of a cop out. You got to have something. I have specific types of fishing I enjoy more than others. But usually when people say, what's your favorite destination? It's like my next trip. I'm fired up.
And I've got 3 spots left. Would you like?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but no, I mean, I think you do. You get pumped up, you get psyched up for the next trip you're going on. I mean, my next scheduled trip right now is to the Seychelles and Providence. Providence Atoll and chasing GTs and all the different exotic species. And I've never been to the Indian Ocean. So it's a first for me. I mean, I've fished all over the world, fresh and salt, but I haven't been to the Indian Ocean, just the way it worked out. So I'm pumped for that.
When are you going?
Going in March 19th through the 26th.
Okay. So we're recording this in November 2023 in case anyways, I mean, I'm sure he'll go back again and can help you set up a trip, but that's pretty fun to go with somebody like Pat that's been a lot of places, to go with them the first time they go somewhere. I don't even know if you have spots or.
No, well, we do have one spot. One guy had to cancel due to a medical issue. He's getting older.
Ooh, yeah.
So, no, I have one spot, but I'm going to be running point, and we do a fair amount of business there. And I got some of my guys here in the office have been several times. So, no, I'm pumped on it. And then I'm home for a few months, and then I'm going to go musky fishing up in Canada with a group of guys. Yeah.
Okay.
It's totally outside of anything I've ever done. Done some pike fishing, things like that, but musky on the fly, 100%. That's going to be a really cool trip. And these boys got it dialed in.
Yeah. And I'm happy you said that, because that's my recollection of musky. I've never really been, but it's like, if you get it right, it's friggin' amazing. It's a lot of fun, but you got to get it dialed in.
Yeah.
So especially with a fly rod, I mean, I've never fished for muskie with anything, so I really don't know, but that sounds like that would be pretty cool. Anything else coming down the pike that someone might not even know? Any new destinations that are coming up with the fly shop? Any new partnerships? Any great big trips you're taking? Anything at all?
I mean, I think the jungle fishing still is probably in its infancy. Brazil, Colombia, Bolivia. I think there's still fisheries out there that we haven't seen or experienced, which in this day and age, you'd say that's impossible, but I think they are still out there. I feel some of the Southern Hemisphere, I feel Australia is probably going to be the next, Indian Ocean, like it was 20 years ago. I think there's going to be a big push for Australia. It's a huge country. They have a lot of water, a lot of saltwater destinations that we don't even know about. We're just ignorant about them.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be up and coming. And it's really when people say, well, it's so far, and it's not that much further than going, flying to Dubai and then to Mahi to get to the Seychelles, or flying to Buenos Aires and then Rio Grande. It's not that much further.
And people have been going to New Zealand fly fishing for years. So come on. Anybody that's been in New Zealand can't really use that excuse. New Zealand's one of my favorite places. And it touches on a lot of the things we've already discussed. Very, very cool. It's a real pleasure. I'm curious, is there anything that you think that I should have asked? I forgot to ask anything at all that you think we should add to this particular conversation before we wrap it up?
No, I think we covered some good topics. I would just maybe end our conversation as like, gosh, if you're thinking about going, go. Don't wait. Life is short. Things happen. It's unpredictable. And if you have the time, you have the means to go, and it doesn't mean you have to go to some far off land. It's like, go for a hike or go down to your local stream and fish and just get outside and enjoy the outdoors.
That's perfect place to stop. And when I edit this, I'm going to play that over and over a few more times just so people.
Yeah, the word recreation is to recreate, and it's really, really cool. And it's true.
It is. It's very cool. Thank you, Pat.
Absolutely,
words of wisdom. Appreciate the opportunity to connect with you here, and look forward to working with you on projects and all kinds of stuff, and having more conversations in the future. So again, thanks for sharing your time. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity.
I trust you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're enjoying the Big World Made Small podcast, please take a moment to tell the algorithm by subscribing and posting a review so that others can benefit as well. I also invite you to take a quick trip over to bigworldmadesmall.com and join our private adventure travel community to receive new episode notifications, special access to our guest experts, and perhaps even some exclusive partner offers that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I'll publish another episode soon. Until then, keep exploring. It's the best way to make a big world feel just a bit smaller.